Hey guys, MadMankey13 here, and a few weeks back I finally played through the entirety of Ultrakill. I really liked it. It's probably my new favorite game of all time. So in this video, I thought I would do a few tier lists, because that seems to be all I do lately, going over weapons, enemies, and levels. Before I go any further, a major announcement is that this will probably be the last video I film on this PC. As of recording this, tomorrow I'm getting a new laptop, so expect new videos to be on that, so if the audio sounds a little different, you know why. Alright, starting off, I'm just going to put every weapon that I either have never used or I barely use into the, obviously I don't use tier. I've never used either of the rocket launchers that aren't just the base one. I know this one fires a cannonball and this one, like, shoots gasoline, but I've just never felt a need to use them because, I'm going to be honest, I hardly ever use the rocket launcher to begin with. I'll get onto that later. I also have not unlocked the alternate shotguns yet. I am familiar with how they work. I saw a video on it, but I personally have never used them. And then same with either of the alternate shock traps that aren't this one. I'm gonna come back to the alternate revolvers after I talk about the base three, because they're somewhat similar. Starting with the regular revolver, I think this one's called the Piercer. It's the first weapon you get in the game, and it does its job pretty well. It just fires a standard shot, and if you hold right-click, it fires a shot that pierces glass, which you can use to drop enemies into, like, the void. I wouldn't say it's one of the best weapons in the game, but it's an Ultrakill weapon, which automatically makes it pretty good, so I'll put it in A tier. Then we have the Marksman, which you already know that's like the best weapon in the game. If you somehow don't know how this works, regular fire is similar to the Piercer, but the coin mechanic is probably one of the most utilized mechanics in the game. You can skip boss fights with it, you can skip levels with it, you can punch the coin for extra style, you can, obviously, if you shoot the coin at just the right time, it fires off into 2 shots. Great weapon. Although I barely ever used it on my first playthrough, funnily enough. Next we have the Sharpshooter, which, if you hold down right-click, it'll spin in your hand, and when you release it, it will ricochet off walls, doing more damage than if you just hit a target regularly. I think this is going to be another double S tier weapon, because solely just on the fact that when I first fought V2, I was using the trick of hold down alt fire, and in the moment V2 jumps through the window, just shoot them, and it dealt a lot of damage. I'm going to put all of the alternates one tier. I'm going to put them all in. I've used these before, I've used them enough to where I don't want to put them in the I don't use tier, but I use them so little that I think I just gotta put them in I don't use. They work similarly to their regulars, except for the fact that they do more damage, but it takes longer to reload. Alright, next up, the base form shotgun. I'm not great with the specific names, but this one fires, I just usually call it a grenade. I don't know if that's exactly what the term is called, but alt fire fires a grenade, and the regular shot pierces enemies like filth and strays. If you ever want to just get almost an immediate supreme rank, all you have to do is just jump in the air over like 4 to 5 filth and alt fire onto them. It's fun to use. Probably S tier alone, just for the fact that you can projectile boost. I would put this in S tier if I knew how to, like, properly dash to where, like, should probably explain. So this alt fire works by just repeatedly pumping the shotgun, but if you use it too much, it will self-destruct and damage you. However, if you slide right before, it negates the damage. I'd put this in S tier if I knew how to do it, but I'm still going to put it in high A tier because projectile boost exists. The saw, I literally have only used once, and it was against V2 when I played recently. I figured it worked better than the sharpshooter. But, it did work pretty well, though. But I'm going to put it in just B tier, just because I've never felt the need to use it. But I've used it enough to where I don't want to justify... Okay, not that I've used it enough, it's that the time I used it, it was really useful. Next up is the nail gun. I'm going to put it like this. The very level you get a nail gun in, 1-1, is the very first level I ever P-ranked, and it was solely because of the nail gun and the magnet ability. So I'm just going to put... I think it belongs in S. I'm going to get rid of the double S tier, because I usually only ever do 5 tiers. I don't think it's better than the shotgun. I feel like I use it more than the shotgun, though. Because on, like, big enemies, like Corpse of King Minos or his hand, it just feels better to use. Or, like, on Gabriel. I think I'm going to put it higher than the shotgun. Saw traps. Literally against any stationary boss, like the head of the Earth Mover, this thing is super useful for. However, there aren't too many stationary bosses. I can think of Hideous Mass, obviously Earth Mover, and... I'm trying to think... But other than that, you kind of have to, like, bait them into walking into the saw trap. It's kind of like reverse of the magnet, where as the magnet, like, attracts it to, like, one spot, the saw trap circles around that one spot with a pretty wide radius. So I'm going to put this in B tier. Then, I'm just going to say it, the green nail gun. When you fire it regularly, it charges up a battery, and when you right-click, it'll use that battery up and deal more damage. And then after 2 charges of that, it just effectively becomes useless. I would say that the 2 fights I use this on the most are Corpse of King Minos' hand, and, well, I guess all of just Corpse of King Minos, and Gabriel, just because it's a consistent way to deal damage. But other than that, I don't use it too often because I feel like there are just other weapons I'd rather use, like the regular nail gun. And if you hear loud noises, that's just my sister being my sister. Like that. I'm going to put this in high A tier. And if you give me a second, I'm going to go close my door. Alright, the electricity nail gun, which will fire an electric shot, or power shoot through a cord if you're close enough to your target. Works well for stationary bosses like Hideous Mass, although you probably don't want to focus on hitting Hideous Mass more than you want to do the tail that will, like, grappling hook you. I'm going to put this in C tier just because I've used it enough to know how it works. I just choose not to use it, if that makes sense. Alright, the rail cannons. Base rail cannon, I would say high A tier. Because obviously it does a lot of damage, pierces infinite amount of enemies, and there's even the trick to kill Cerberus where you flip a coin through them, flip a coin on the other side of them, then fire the rail cannon 3 times, or like you can fire it once to effectively hit the target 3 times. This thing does have a lot of use, and it's probably one of my most used. Alright, I'm going to click off this. This is probably going to be one of my more controversial takes. The screwdriver rail cannon is one of the most underrated weapons in the game. So, the way it works is it'll fire the drill into an enemy where it'll get stuck in there, in like the enemy's body, which will cause them to bleed, which you can use to heal over time. It obviously allows you to heal as long as you can get close to your enemy, which, if you're fighting stuff like Gabriel, which is where I found out how useful this was, he's going to be pretty close to you most of the fight. However, stuff like the very first time you fight Cerberus, if you punch the drill and the other target is positioned right, you can get the drill stuck in the other enemy and the counter resets, allowing you to basically just hit it infinite amount of times as long as you can line up the targets right. It is one of my most used weapons. I would argue I use it more than Sharpshooter. So I would honestly say I feel like I'd get a lot of hate if I were to put it higher than the Marksman, but I think I'm going to do that just solely on the basis of I used it more in my first playthrough. Then the Malicious Rail Cannon, I think I don't think you can you bounce this off coins? I think I've done it in Gabriel 2. It basically just fires the same beam that Malicious Face fires. I mean, it's good. I'd say it's probably my least used of the 3 rail cannons, but it's the rail cannon, so it's good. And the rocket launcher, it only deals damage on direct impact, and if an enemy is standing near it, they'll just be launched up, which I guess is good if you want to do air shots, which I suck at. And then you can freeze rockets and ride on them, which I never do. I'm gonna put this in mid B tier. I'll put it here. Alright, Feedbacker Arm is obvious S tier. Alright, you know what, I'm gonna just put these in order. I'm debating whether or not if I should put them on rank, because it's hard to rank arms compared to guns. But the Feedbacker Arm is the weapon you're going to be parrying with. It's what you have until you beat V2. That's how you do projectile boost. This is probably one of your most useful things in the game. I'm going to put it actually at number 1. Knuckle Blaster. My biggest complaint with this isn't really the fact that you can't parry with it. It's the fact that the game waits to tell you can't parry with it. So, for those who haven't played the game, first of all, what are you doing? I'm talking about the levels and enemies. There are going to be spoilers, so stop right here and go play it yourself. 2, if you don't care about spoilers, you get this arm at the end of 1-4 after beating V2, so you have to beat all of 2-1 and the first part of 2-2, which is pretty long and has a lot of projectile-based enemies, before the game tells you can't parry with it. I remember on 2-1, there's this section with 3 drones, and I was trying to figure out the parry timing because I just thought it was different compared to the Feedbacker, and I remember how upset I was when the game was in the very next level, it was oh yeah, you can't parry with this. It does a lot more damage than the Feedbacker, and then it has the Shockwave. But I'm gonna be honest, I only started using this when I got the Whiplash. So I'm gonna put this high A tier. Alright, the Whiplash. I would have, before it got changed, I would have put this in C tier for just kind of breaking the game. It allows you to it's basically a grappling hook for these green or blue orbs that you'll find around the map. But what most people use it for is to pull small enemies towards them or pull themselves towards large enemies. And the way it broke the game was that if you were ever low on health, you could just pull a weak enemy to you and then hit it and gain health back. However, it was changed to where now if you use it and you get damaged, it deals hard damage, which basically lowers your max HP until you up your style meter by 1 letter. And the only exception to this is when you're underwater, and I just love the message that Hakita wrote. It's just literally just says, "Go nuts, have fun." I'm gonna put it in mid S tier. For those, I'll actually say that when we get to the enemy section. Speaking of which, enemies. We have P, S, A, B, C, D, and haven't fought. I'm just gonna put the 2 I haven't fought in here. I suck, obviously. I have not P ranked every level in Act 2. I know, great sin. Moving on. Filth is a really good first enemy, and I will admit that these guys have killed me more times than I am gonna say out loud. because you always lose track of one when you're killing it in a horde, and they do a decent chunk of damage. B tier. Strays are your introduction to parrying. They'll just stand there, maybe move a little bit, and fire projectiles at you, which you punch back at them. They're fun to fight. Malicious Face, or as it's more commonly known, Maurice. This is going to be the start of a trend most Ultrakill bosses have, where they're tricky when you fight them at first, but then when you fight them more often and you learn their mechanics, they just become super easy. And since Malicious Face is one that you'll be fighting a lot because it'll appear in multiple levels after that, it shares that with Cerberus, you learn that you can like one-shot it with the sharpshooter. You can shoot a coin at it when it's about to do its malicious shot. It does get a little bit tiring seeing it after a while, so I'm going to put it in C tier. I think this is called the Schism. It basically just is like the Stray, except it shoots multiple projectiles in like a horizontal or vertical line. I've wanted to try to parry multiple of them, but I don't think you can do that if it's vertical, which I seem to get more often than horizontal. B tier. Swords Machine, I'm going to put in S tier. This is a really fun fight, and it's one of the few bosses I actually beat on my first try ever playing it, which was literally just me spamming shotgun and the punch. But then over time, as you fight it more and more, you learn its attack patterns, you learn when to parry, and this is probably the peak of learning how to fight it more the more times you do it. And it's because you go from like just blindly spamming parry and hoping one connects to actually like, alright, it's going to do this attack, when do I parry? Cerberus? Ooh, Shay, this is interesting. I like the Cerberus boss fight in 0-5. Where, like, there's both of them, and if you kill one, the other gets enraged, and you have to beat it quickly, or else you're probably going to die. They also do this in 3-1, only there's 3 of them now. So, where would I put this? Every other instance of it, it's just kind of eh. It's probably the hardest common enemy. I mean, obviously it is a boss, besides maybe gutter tanks, which we will be getting to later. I'm going to put it in low A tier. Drones, I played this first on my own, but when I beat it, it was over when I was hanging out with Ghetto Pizza, and we both agree that this is our least favorite enemy. It is so annoying to fight. The projectiles are fine, but it'll anytime you try to shoot at it, it'll probably just dodge you, and then it will just dive bomb you, which was annoying until I found out you could parry it, which it is kind of fun to like whiplash and then punch it with a knuckle blaster just to send it flying back at the other enemies. So for that, I won't put it in D tier. But it's still pretty annoying to fight. Street Cleaner. I like the implications of its name, implying that it cleans out the streets of people using fire. I like how it's the first enemy's attack that you can't parry. I honestly wish a few more enemies would do that. I think the only ones that really have that are Street Cleaner and Gabriel and Ferryman. Because for some reason Leviathan has a blue flash that you can still parry. However, there's no real strategy to counteract the not being able to parry, because just get in this thing's face with a nail gun and it dies in like 2 seconds. So I'll put it in low B tier. Hideous Mask is the only boss in the game I can comfortably say that I dislike. My big problem with it stems from like when it hooks you. I get like you not being able to do much, but it's the fact that it's hard to get free from, meaning if you get hooked, you're probably gonna die. It also probably has my least favorite memory of anything playing throughout the game. When I beat it, however, I wasn't paying attention to one of the orbs it fired in the air, so not only did it kill me, it caused my game to crash, meaning I had to do all of 1-3 over again. I do kind of like the double fight in 6-1, where you have to fight 2 of them. But in 1-3, from now on, I just always use soap fighting when I fight this. And then I fight the other, like the Twin Swords machines, just to get the extra style points. Which, the Agony and Tundra Swords machines aren't on here, but they'd probably also be an S tier. Alright, V2 P rank. Don't act like you were surprised. This is, you're fighting yourself. Except they really can't dodge and they can't parry, which actually V2 never parrying any of my attacks is what clued me into the Knuckle Blaster not being able to parry. This one, I will say, I see a lot of people saying the second V2 fight is harder than the first one, which I never got. I guess that's just because I didn't use the Marksman, so I didn't know that V2 could shoot your coins in the second fight. But this fight took me like 20 tries on my first try, and this one took me like 3. But this is just a really fun, chaotic fight, and I love it. Alright, next we have, I think this is called the Soldier, but I and everybody else in the community seems to call it Pepsi Man. Just stray but better. It fires 1 projectile at you and then 3 kind of in a Y pattern. Good enemy. Mind Flares. These are probably the tankiest common enemy that, like, you aren't a boss. They have the laser attack, and then they have the Seeker bullets, which are just the stray fires but blue, and they look for you. I'm gonna go... It's fun to fight, definitely. Like, it actually, like, tests what you know, and it's not just like a filth where they die in one hit. It's like the Pepsi Man, where you can just parry. Well, you can parry the Hellseeker bullets, but that won't do much. A tier. Corpse of King Minos. If this was just like... If your whole main goal was to just shoot it enough to where it died, I'd probably only put it in A tier. But you can parry its punches. That one mechanic of being able to effectively fist bump a boss that's 100 times your height is enough to put this in P rank. Gabriel 1. This one was just hectic. It took me 50 tries, I think, on my first attempt, and I only won because I dropped him in a pit several times, which apparently was the secret, and I got it by accident. Gabriel, I spent a lot more time on Gabriel 2, and yet, funnily enough, this is the fight I went back and was able to P rank. Don't ask how, I don't know. I'm gonna put it in high S tier. Virtues I'm not a big fan of, solely because if there's multiple of them, they can kind of just death strike you. But I like the concept of them basically forcing you to move around, so I guess high B tier. I'm gonna put the Schisms higher than Filth. Alright, Flesh Prison. Why didn't I have not played P-1, but I'm familiar with most of the mechanics, so maybe that's why I didn't put them in Haven't Fought. But I'm working really hard on unlocking P-1. I think the only levels I have left to P rank are 2-1 through 2-3, and then 3-1. But I've seen... So my uneducated thoughts on Flesh Prison is that it looks chaotic with, like, the Hellseeker spirals, the eyes it uses to heal himself, whereas Minos Prime yells out his attacks before he does them, but you just gotta learn how to counter them. Stalkers. I have no idea what these things do. They die in a matter of seconds. I've never seen one be able to attack me. Maybe someone in the comments can explain what they do. The Sisyphean Insurrectionist. This guy I really only get fun when I mess with it, like how it will follow you back to the start of the stage. It just jumps up and flings a giant rock at you. The fight itself isn't great, but it's fun. Second V2 fight. It's definitely easier than the first one, but I would honestly argue it's more fun because of the second half, where you're sliding down a pyramid fighting. Again, chaotic first half, fun second half, and it gets you the whiplash, so... forget what these things are called. They're called sentries. Uh, they give you a whole list of like how to counter them. So literally just shoot it with your sharpshooter, and they're just not even that big of a threat. I've never been hit by one of these things. All right, statues. Statues don't exactly attack you, but what they do is they bless certain enemies, meaning you can't attack them. I've heard that these things are used a lot in P-2, but I wouldn't know. I haven't played P-2. The blessed mechanic is pretty interesting, as it forces you to take out enemies in a certain order, because a lot of the times you have to defeat a whole slew of enemies before you can unlock the blessed statue to beat the blessed enemy. So for like forcing your hand at a certain way, almost makes me want to put it in a lower tier, because obviously I should be able to fight enemies in the order I want to, but for some reason the statue makes it work. I'm gonna go mid B tier. Alright, I was confused as to what this enemy was at first, but it's the Leviathan, so I'm gonna come back to that. For the Ferryman, I have fought this guy once, had no idea what I was doing, somehow beat him second try, and from now on I just skip him. I remember somewhat liking his fight, so I'm gonna go low A tier. Leviathan is fun. It's fun to use Whiplash to like grapple onto it. It's fun to just parry the crap ton of hell energy orbs it fires at you. It's actually really easy to P rank because it just gives you so many style points that really all you have to focus on is just not dying. So I'm gonna put it in low S tier. Gabriel 2 is my favorite fight in the game. For some reason, his attack patterns in this fight are easy to like memorize than the first fight. I don't know why. The organ solo is great. Death of God's Will is definitely better than Divine Intervention. Do not ask me to do a tier list on the soundtrack, because all of it will either be an S tier or another S tier. Mannequins. I will say the jump scare did get me in 7-1, but other than that, I really don't have much to say on them. Cool enemy. Minotaur, I don't really get the hate for. It's just kind of an general indifference for me. So I guess I'd probably just put it in C tier. The only thing I really remember is the jump scare second phase, where after you get off like the tracks and you're about to go to the end of the level, it just jumps through. So, yeah. Alright. Gutter, whatever the second half of this guy's name was, and Gutter Tanks. 7-2 is... I'll get to that when I get to that, but these guys, I'm not a big fan of them. I'd definitely say this guy is definitely more tolerable to fight, so I'll put him in mid-B tier. But Gutter Tanks, they just take so long to kill, and if there's any more than 2 of them, have fun dying a lot. And then you have Earth Mover, which I will only be counting the defense system and the head for this, because the rest of this level should be considered as my ranking for 7-4. And the defense system was just kind of but the brain fight was really fun, like maneuvering around the lasers, trying to get to the statue, and then dealing damage. I'll put it in high A tier. Yeah, I'll put it above Mind Flayer. Alright. Lastly, we have levels. Any secret level past 1-S, I have not played. And then I don't think 7-S is out yet. Oh yeah, and then same with the P- levels. I'm bad, I know. Into the Fire is your standard tutorial level. Nothing great, nothing bad. I do like its structure of how it'll teach you one thing and then just teach you another thing and then another thing, and then it caps it off with a boss fight. Meat Grinder is... God, it's hard for me to rank levels. It's okay. A lot of Prelude is just kind of alright. I like Double Down. I'm gonna skip Meat Grinder and come back to Double Down. I like how the challenge it gives you is to only kill one enemy, that being Swords Machine, obviously. So you have to skip a large portion of the level, and basically you have to go through a glass ceiling in order to get to Swords Machine. But if you go to the standard route, you have to fight Swords Machine the first time to get the shotgun, and then you go back up, use the shotgun. I just like how this level is designed, and I'll put it in high A tier. Alright. Meat Grinder. I'm going to put it higher than Into the Fire, but it's just nothing memorable for me. A One Machine Army. And by the way, the Prelude levels I think are the only ones I know by name, aside from maybe a few others. I like the double Malicious Face fight, but other than that, I don't remember too much from this. I remember it was the last Prelude level I P-ranked. Cerberus. I mean, I literally just said that I really liked the Cerberus boss fight. Even the build-up to it is fun because you can either parkour across the lava or you can just take the standard route. 0-S, fun, spooky level. 1-1 was the first ever level I P-ranked. You get the nail gun, which is great, but it also introduces the drones, which is not great. I'll go A tier. 1-2 introduced Shriek Cleaners, and that's kind of it. Oh, no, wait, this had the Cancerous Rodents fight, so I'm putting it in S tier. Obviously, both versions of the Cancerous Rodent will go in P rank. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. 1-3 is probably my favorite level in Limbo, solely because you can either pick one path, or you could do both and gain access to probably my favorite early game boss fight with the Swords Machine, Agony, and Tundra. And all of that is just so good in the fact that you can choose, like, had you been forced to fight Hideous Mass, I probably would put this a lot lower, but you can just use Soap, so you can skip it if you want to. So, great level. Also, Castle Vane goes really hard. Claire de Lune. Finding the skulls is fun, although I really only ever did that on my first 2 tries, and then I found out you can just shoot the window. And then you have the V2 fight, which I'm trying to go based off of, like, not boss fights overall on the boss levels, but also, like, the getting to the boss fight. So, in that case, like, finding the skulls is fun. The little, when you go through the door after getting the first skull, V2, like, slides by. That caught me off guard the first time. S tier. What is this? I thought this, I should probably put this in A tier. Hate it. I'm sorry. I'm playing an action game, not freaking flow free. They could have, Hakita could definitely have dialed back, and I know I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. 2-1. I'm going to put this in A tier because, obviously, your first time seeing Corpse of King Minos is going to shock a lot of people. I like the part where you're walking across and then it drops you in, or right when the Cerberus is spawning. So you're going to have to fight a bunch of enemies in addition to another Cerberus. But there's really not much to say. It's either death by 20,000 volts or death at 20,000 volts. This is probably this and 7-2 are probably the longest I've ever spent on levels, because that last section was really hard for me that first time. But it's a fun level, with the whole punching the electricity boxes to you gotta punch all 3, and every time you punch a new one, enemies spawn in. And once you get all 3, you can go through. Then there was that staircase section. This is also the level where you get the rail cannon. So that's nice. 2-3, Sheer Heart Attack. I remember the names for these levels a lot more than I thought I did. I mean, it introduced the Mind Flayer. Which, okay. There's really just not much for me to say on this level. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Court of the Corpse King. Probably is my favorite setup to a boss fight. Most boss levels are just kind of go and fight the boss. This, you have a whole section of finding 2 skulls, and in between you have to fight his hand. And the music that plays in the background, for some reason my headphones have been acting up lately, so I only got to experience like the music later. But it is the perfect build-up to one of the best bosses in the game. 3-1 is kind of just a boss gauntlet. Nothing much outside of that. It's where you find the door for P-1, but it's just fighting bosses. My personal favorite moment from playing on this computer. This computer is obviously not great. Even Ultrakill would lag a little bit, which I've heard it's not that demanding of a game. But in this one section, there are a bunch of enemies, and after you beat them all, 3 malicious faces spawn in. However, I would always like leave 1 or 2 enemies unkilled, so I wouldn't be sure when the malicious faces would spawn in. But on this computer, the lag spike when the 3 malicious faces spawned in was just enough to immediately signal that like, hey, they've spawned, and I just think that's kind of funny. I kind of like boss rushes, so I guess it's not too bad. The Gabriel fight, I really wish I knew this game had voice acting the first time I played it. Because, again, the audio was messed up. When I played this over at Ghetto Pizza's house, the voice... Gianni, I don't know how you pronounce his name. This is probably one of my favorite voice roles of all time. So yeah, the build up to this fight and then the actual fight is amazing. 4-1 was what is the level that introduced like the dual wielding, which that final section is really fun. 4-2 is probably the level 4-2 and then maybe 5-1 are the levels I probably remember the least about, but I remember this one was pretty enjoyable. 4-3, Maxor called it what? I forget who, but it was some Egyptian guy's nuclear reactor, which, great. But, again, oh wait, this is the level that had the druid and owl guy with, like, the fuller auto as a reference to some YouTuber. I feel like that should put it in A tier. Obviously, with this, I'm kind of just putting them in random spots. I'm not focusing too much on the ordering, because all levels are great. This is where you got the saw weapon, and then, like I said, the pyramid slide was really fun. 5-1 is fully underwater, which means you can use the whiplash with no consequence, and for that I think S tier, because using the whiplash is fun. 5-2 introduced statues. You didn't really get much of a walkway, so there was very little room for error. There's also the ferryman fight, which probably is one of the more, I don't want to say better designed fights, but like it's funny how it just gives you the option to skip the fight. Good level. Wrath, I really wasn't paying much attention to. 5-3, I liked how once you get the rocket launcher, it just inverts the level. Like the ship flips over, and like the tunnel you exit through is the one you entered with, which is just a fun detail. Here, Leviathan, I like how you can either just rocket launch and then malicious face cannon yourself up to skip the build-up, or you can just do the build-up, which is another great boss fight build-up. 6-1 is probably, I don't like it as much as 3-1. I'm not a big fan of like all of the red design, which yeah, I get, it's hell, yada yada yada. It's just not my favorite designed fight, or my favorite designed level. The double hideous mouse fight was fun. All the other bosses coming in was fun, but not great. I'm taking back what I said about Corpse of King Minos having the best boss build-up, because Gabriel 2 had the best. The speech he gives, and then the organ, top 5 moments of gaming right there. I'm gonna do violence out of order. 7-2, I'm not a big fan of. I really don't like the ending fight. Gutter tanks can just go die. Seriously, I was making decent time on this level, and then that section probably took 2/3 of the 30 minutes I spent on that level. 7-1, I don't remember too much aside from the mannequin jump scare and the Minotaur fight. So I'll probably just put it right here. 7-3, I liked the look of the level. The only real thing I remember of it is you can become marked for death. Basically, their enemies are fighting each other because, you know, it's violence, war, all that. However, if you become marked for death, you're the only one that they're going to be targeting. It's a fun way to make the level harder. I'm 99% sure that this is where 7-S is going to be when it releases. A tier. And then Earth Mover, there's no build up to this fight, so it's hard for me to rank it. But like I said, in the enemies, the whole level is the boss fight. Like, you're climbing up Earth Mover. I just think it's funny that all of the best levels in the game were boss fights, because it's almost like this game has really good boss design. Anyways, that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, comment, and try out Ultrakill for yourself. It's a great game. See you on my new laptop next time. Madden Making 13 out.